Peter Reliades with you. This is a YouTube update for stock market cycles for Sunday, July 9th. We're doing a pretty quick update now. We did one just a few weeks ago, but we wanted to catch you up because we showed this spectacular trend line. Remember, there was initially a trend line from 2009 on the S&P that went through the 2018 and the 2020. That's these two tops here. And it was a beautiful trend line that hit so many important points. But then if you looked at it, maybe I can show it to you quickly. Let's see. There it is. It was the old amazing trend line, okay? So look at it. Here's '09. Look at all the points it hits. It's a fabulous trend line, all these highs. The high in 2018, the high in 2020, got up to them, had sharp declines, and finally broke above it, came below it, a little bit above it, down. And then for this whole period, from September of 22 through May of 23, okay, we're talking about 8 months, it remained below that trend line and looked like it was going to break down at any moment. Well, guess what it did? It did this. And so you looked at that and said, well, gosh, that has to be very bullish. That must mean we're going back to the old highs. Well, it might mean that, but hold on just a second. This is what I showed you in the last update a few weeks ago. This is the trend line on a logarithmic chart using these same 2 points, the 2018 high and the 2020 high. But it's now on a semi-log chart. This scale is logarithmic, not linear or arithmetic. And we pointed out to you just a couple of days after this point in here that prices had hit the trend line virtually exactly. How exact? Well, I didn't give you the numbers then. I want to give them to you right now. On June 16th, this log trend line, this red line, was at 4442.93 exactly, okay? The high that day, 4448.47. How close was that to the trend line? Within 0.1% of a perfect hit of the trend line. And then we pulled back. This is where we did the update. We showed you the trend line. Well, guess what? We went back up to the trend line again on June 30th. And I'm sure all the Elides and stock market cycles lovers out there are saying, oh my God, look at this. Elides blew the market completely. He said we were going to stop at that trend line. Look where we are. We've gone to a higher high. Well, guess what? Yes, you did go to a slightly higher high. Let me give you the numbers for June 30th, okay? On June 30th, this log trend line, that's this day right in here if you follow the vertical cursor. The log, I'll give you the log number. You can look it up. Your logarithmic tables, 3.648928769. The anti-log of that logarithmic number is 445580. That's where the log trend line was on June 30th. 445580. Would you like to know what the high was on that day? 4458.48. And in that case, it was within 0.06% of an exact hit. So nothing changed, okay? Yes, we came back and hit it again. And mind you, I mean, nothing says that when you hit the trend line, you have to turn down. You can go like, if the trend line's going to hold prices, you know, you can go into the end of the year and you can say, well, now we're up to 46.50, whatever. I don't think that's going to happen, okay? You hit this trend line again, and I'm going to show you a few things in a few minutes that might lead you to believe that that might be it. So another virtually exact hit of this trend line. Now, we pointed out before why this trend line could be so important. And I want you to look at some of the declines we've had once the trend line has been reached from underneath. This is the 2020 high right here. Here's the 2018 high. and it was reached from underneath there. And this doesn't look like a huge decline, but this is about a 10 or 15% decline right here. This is a record-breaking decline from an all-time high. We had never fallen 35% from an all-time high in such a short period of time in the history of the markets. That had never happened before. And once again, a sharp decline from the trend line, finally breaking above it. And then we see this little action in here, okay? This is 2022. We broke below it again, came up to it, did surpass it by a little bit, but had this very large decline. I think this was around a 20% decline, and we slowly have creeped back to it again, okay? So that's where we stand with this mystical, almost magical trend line, okay? Now watch this, and this is a repeat of what I showed you a few weeks ago. Okay, I want to be sure you could see this whole chart because I didn't want my head in the way over here. This is, move this up a little bit so you can see what it is. It's the NDX, the NASDAQ 100 weekly chart. And there are 3 or 4 things here that are very important. I showed some of these to you on the last YouTube update, but we're going to review them now because they are of the utmost importance. First of all, look at this trend line, okay? This is, remember, the one I just showed you was the S&P. This is the NASDAQ 100. Quite similar, not exactly the same. Starts in '02. Look what happened in '08. Came down to the trend line, studded, played around with it for a while, had a little rally, came down to it again and held, and finally broke it. And this was one of the great short-term crashes in market history. This break right here, okay, taking you down to the '08, '09 bottoms in the NDX. And then for years and years and years, attempting to get back to that trend line. 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Finally, in 2018, it got back up to the trend line again around September, October. Had a very sharp decline after getting up there. Then climbed its way back again, February of 2020, another very sharp decline. This was the historic decline I told you about on the S&P from an all-time high, okay? And then, just as on the S&P, broke above it and made one big move to the upside. Now, this is even clearer in terms of this trend line and what we see on the NDX, because when it broke here, when it broke again after finally getting above, and when it got above, that was June of 2020. It did not break below until April, May of 2022, almost 2 years later. But it broke, okay? And look what happened. Tried to get back to it. This is August of 22. Big decline. This is about a 20% decline. Slowly but surely creeped and crawled its way back again. And I'm going to zoom in on this for you because sometimes the trend line, because it's logarithmic, gets screwed up. But I think I've got this one fixed so you can see it. Look at this. A virtual exact hit of the trend line. And again, down and back up towards it. Now, the S&P hit it again this time around. The NDX just missed it. So here's the action through Friday, okay? As I'm recording this update, chart is right up to date. Okay, what else do we have to show you here? Well, this is really important. This is kind of a measurement of speculation. I showed this to you a few weeks ago. It's a spread. It's a ratio spread. NDX, NASDAQ 100, divided by the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That's this pale little green here. It's not that important, the Dow, and so I'm not featuring that chart. I just kind of scrunched it up in the middle here. The important thing is the NASDAQ divided by the Dow and what that ratio is. So follow it. We're going back. This goes back almost 30 years, 1994. Okay? Just follow it. This is the ratio. Now, this was one of the most speculative periods in market history. Began, you could argue, in 98, started accelerating in 99, and coming into early 2000, it was going up exponentially. Huge market bubble where doctors and lawyers were quitting their professions to trade the stock market. It was so easy to make money in the stock market. That's what happened here, okay? And that ratio for 1 week got above this blue line. You say, well, what's the blue line? The blue line, follow me to the right. The blue line is where we closed on Friday. That's 2 days ago. Today is July 9th. This is where we closed on July 7th. We closed at a ratio of 0.4457. Okay? That's NASDAQ 100 divided by DJIA. So that's a weird number, 0.457. What significance does it have? Well, I'll show you exactly what significance it had. First of all, in this wild, crazy, speculative fervor in the year 2000 that led to this high in the NDX, there was only 1 week within a week or two of the very high where we got up to the ratio that we hit on Friday. Remember, at least in theory, you can make a strong argument that this is a measure of big time speculation in the market. It's the high tech, technological stocks, the technology stocks versus the high cap conservative stocks. And this is what you got up to for 1 week. Only 1 week, and I've drawn a vertical line so you can see where it happened. This is where it happened on the NDX, okay, in the year 2000. Within 3 weeks of that high, 3 weeks on the NDX, let me see if I can zoom in here without losing perspective. Okay, here's where the reading took place, okay? 2 weeks later, in a sideways market, there was no further rally. Once you got this extreme reading, you had nowhere to go, okay? The high on this week was 46.60 rounded off. The high here was 48.16. So you're talking about 200 points, maybe 1 or 2% higher right here, okay? But here's a couple of things to point out. From this high, which occurred a couple of weeks after we got this reading above the 44.57, from here, from the high that week to the low 1, 2, 3 weeks later, you know what kind of decline that was? This is incredible. Watch this. That's what kind of decline it was. 34.8% decline from this high to this low in 3 weeks. Okay. That was the result. What happened after you reached this reading above 0.4457. By the way, the reading that week was 0.4620. Okay. All right. Let's back up again. Okay. So this is very, very important. Put this in perspective. Again, this was the Friday close on the speculative ratio, NASDAQ divided by Dow. On Friday, it closed here. We went back historically for almost 30 years. And if you went back even further, you'd see basically the same thing. You've never been close to a reading like this except at this 1 week in 2000. And now guess what? So this is what happened after we had that bear market. And by the way, I said it was down 35% in 3 weeks. This is what it was down in the bear market that went from March of 2000 to October of 02 right here. 83.5% decline on the NDX. Okay, and then what happened? Well, little by little, year by year, climbing up, not that much speculation, rising market, but not any great speculation, okay? rising market and rising pretty healthily, thank you very much. And then now look at this. 2020, all of a sudden, after this good, beautiful, consistent, conservative, I might add, rise, where little by little you would expect the high technology stocks to do better than the high capitalization stocks. And they did, little by little by little, into 2020. And then what happened? Well, guess what? It was speculation time again, folks. Look at this move, okay? From, let's say, right near the end of 2019. As you came into 2020, you came up, you almost hit that level, that almost magical level of 44.57, came back down, backed off, came up, almost hit it again here, and finally, at the very top of the market for the NDX in November of 2021, you finally got above this ratio again. 0.4457. How long did it last? I'll show you. It's bounded by these two vertical dashed lines. Let me show you. Here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for 9 weeks. On these 9 weeks, it's a time span of 8 weeks, but there are 9 weeks that were above this line. That is kind of a measure of real craziness in the market, okay? That's where we closed on Friday, 0.4457. If you go back, this is going back a year and a half now, to the top on the NASDAQ 100. And here's the other thing to point out. When you got up to this reading, okay, above the blue line, it's not like you had a blow off for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks and said, okay, now we're really going to take off. No, it was basically sideways. I put a red line in there, a horizontal red line to show you that on every one of these weeks, at some point during the week, prices were at that red line. So it was a sideways move. And even though it was a sideways move, it was a sideways move that measured once again some of the greatest speculation the market had ever seen historically. So that's where we are. That's where we closed on Friday. Okay. Let me go out in this chart again. Okay. Put it all together, would you please? Do that for me. Put all of this together. Here's the trend line that we finally, after all this work, came back up to from underneath. Okay. And look what's happened in the past when you came up to it from underneath, up to it from underneath. In this case, came down to it, finally broke it, and had this incredible crash-like behavior right here in 2008. Okay. So here we are. Now, I put a couple of little horizontal lines in here. You know what they represent? These lines represent the kind of decline we saw from these equivalent levels in the year 2000. Now you say, well, what makes you think we're going to get that kind of decline again? I'm not predicting you will. What I'm saying is, I want you to know that from this kind of extreme, and this kind of extreme, don't be surprised if you see this kind of decline. Okay? You're not going to get that kind of decline in time zones like this, where you've got an orderly move up in the market, okay? These kind of declines come from this kind of, and this kind of, and this kind of speculation, okay? So that's basically it. Oh, I wanted to show you that, okay, all of a sudden everything went amiss and my mouse gave out. I don't know if it's the battery or whatever it is. But look at the two red horizontal lines way on the right side of the chart, just to the left of the 2000 to 3000 level. If we were to see the kind of decline that we saw in the year 2000, that's what the market would come down to on the NDX. The first one, the higher of those two lines, is measured from the all-time high in 2021. The slightly lower one is measured from current prices now that we are back once again to the trend line. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for watching. I would appreciate it if you give us some comments and a thumbs up, perhaps. Obviously, I'd love favorable comments, but if you have, please appreciate this. I don't need people telling me, oh, you're such an idiot. We're not going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to go to new highs. We're going to do this or that. If you have some kind of grounds, some kind of technical grounds, or even, no, I won't say it. I'm not going to say fundamental. Okay. If you have some kind of technical grounds where you say, hey, I see this and that in the past. And when that's happened in the past, this has happened. Okay. That's what I'm doing here. I'm making observations. I'm observing for you. I'm observing this trend line. I'm observing the valuation, NDX divided by the Dow. You can't argue with the observations. There's something to be observed. Okay. Now you can argue with the conclusions reached, but we only have 2 or 3 instances where it has occurred before. And I rest my case historically with what has happened after that. Okay, with that, I'll leave you. Thank you for watching. We'll be with you back on YouTube sometime soon.